Oh man, people, this is why I tell you. This is why I tell you to give me suggestions for future episodes. You know, like at the end of the video that most of you don't even watch. But it's okay, because one of you amazing people let me know about a little thing called The Promised Neverland a few months back. Because I've been watching those comments. Always watching. And I'll be real, I was a little nervous before watching it. Because you know, it's Netflix. Sometimes you find gold, and other times you find utter rubbish. But not this time. I was so not ready for the psychological and emotional carnival ride that was this anime. From the end of episode 1, I was hooked. So this is what's gonna happen. Not only is this episode of Guidance Guy gonna focus on this great show, but next week's mini is going to be about The Promised Neverland as well. And it's all coming just in time for season 2. The Promised Neverland is a tale of disillusionment and how people respond to having the rug of life being pulled out from under them. And Norman, Ray, and Emma all show distinct ways of dealing with being disenfranchised. And what can we gain from our favorite orphans? I'm the Guidance Guy, and you'll be surprised. Naturally, be careful of them spoilers, and don't forget to do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, and if you haven't already, ring that bell, and if you get any ideas for future Guidance Guy episodes, go ahead and put them in the comments, cause, well, you know what can happen. Disillusionment is an odd thing. It's not a word that we use very often in our everyday lives, but on some level we've all experienced it. Disillusionment is described as the feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as you believed it was. And that feeling can be applied to many different scenarios. It can be as simple as a game you were super psyched about playing, not living up to the hype, or as deep as finding out that the loving relationship that you thought your parents had for each other was little more than a well-maintained act. Disillusionment is like having a band-aid being ripped off of you, except you didn't know that you had a band-aid on to begin with. And I don't know about you, but this year has felt like a massive exercise in disillusionment, and the band-aid coming off has been rough for many. Whether it's finding out that the world isn't quite as safe as we believed, how quickly the normalcy of life we take for granted can be stripped away, or discovering that the systems and people that were put in place to protect the average person really only existed as a means of self-preservation. One of the prevailing lessons that some of us have had to learn in 2020 is that you're on your own, because no one else is looking out for you. And our gifted kids in The Promised Neverland understand this concept well. Once our trio realized that their existence was a lie, that they weren't children in an orphanage with a loving mother waiting to be adopted, but rather commodities being raised to their best quality before being devoured by demons, they experienced a change. They were no longer living a peaceful life waiting for a family to take them in. They were on a farm, or if you read the manga, it's straight up called a plantation, in which the final destination was the slaughterhouse. Especially considering the manner in which Emma and Norman discover the nature of their situation, this could have broken them. But these freedom fighters didn't break, but rather went about their own way to adapt and ultimately rebel against their fate. And the first one we're going to look at is the child genius, Norman. My boy Norman. You gotta give this guy a lot of credit. Norman was able to turn his life into a massive game of 4D chess, being able to anticipate, predict, and then act based not just on the situation around him, but on the actions and motivations of the many players involved. And his strategy was not just his way of showing his intelligence or method of escape, it was his way to cope. Norman had lived his life the same way as the others, with the assumption that he and the other children were living an idyllic life as they waited for their forever family to take them in. But once the truth was revealed, the young Grand Master went about seeking something more than just an escape from eventual doom. He was looking for control. And this is a common way that people react to painful events. When some people are confronted with the fact that they really don't control everything in life, some buckle down to try their hardest to show just how much control they have. And this mastermind showed that to the max. He not only had a step-by-step plan, but he had fail-safes, a plan B and C as a contingency for every possible result. But the problem is that ultimately this coping strategy has its limits, and it didn't save Norman from being shipped out. Now, you could argue that this plan ultimately worked since he was able to get the majority of the kids out, and him getting shipped out was part of his plan all along. but the plan was for everyone to get out. And unless he managed to get out some other way, the dream of everyone escaping didn't quite make it. And we need to remember this. It's good to plan and to think ahead, but we can't strategize every single detail in life. Something's gonna happen that will catch us off guard. We can't control everything in our lives. But let's get back to Norman's coping skill a little bit later. For now, let's move on to the grumpy Gus of the group, Ray. Look, I understand it can be easy to dump on Ray's decisions and actions, especially in the early episodes. This guy was willing to betray, lie, backstab, whatever it took as long as he got his. When he, Emma, and Norman got together to plan their prison break, he wasn't afraid to say that it was impractical to save everyone. And as long as he and his closest friends were safe, everyone else was on their own. In fact, Ray had known about the secret of the orphanage for years before Ginger and Normie found out. So how could he have turned out the way he did and stay that way for so long? Was Ray evil? A bad seed that needed to be reformed? No, Ray isn't evil, and his actions are actually more normal than we'd like to admit. Think back. I said earlier that we've seen people act selfishly in their own interest at the expense of others because it benefited them. Whether it was companies sending their workforces back to their posts in the middle of a pandemic, or just straight up laying them off because the bottom line was more important than watching for your employees during an unprecedented time. We've seen self-preservation on a massive scale this year, and Ray is an example of those who see that hypocrisy and go, if you can't beat them, join them. I wonder where he got that idea from. This is not to say that self-preservation in and of itself is bad. The guy's guy ain't saying that. You need to look out for your own good, because the truth is that very few really will. You need a level of self-preservation. You just can't be selfish about it. You can't leave others behind or be willing to abandon those who don't serve your goals anymore, because it will come back to bite you. And thankfully, Ray never had to learn that lesson to its logical conclusion, because his perspective was changed by a certain little red-haired girl. Of the talented trio of The Promised Neverland, Emma is by far the most realistic. As fun as it is to watch these little prodigies go into mental battle against straight-up adults, we'd be pretty freaked out if we saw actual children acting like Ray or Norman. But Emma? She's different. Despite being one of the oldest in the orphanage and also one of the brightest, she still maintains her childlike innocence and sense of wonder. But sadly, this innocence was completely wrecked the moment she realized what happened to Connie once she left the house. And what happened to our star sprinter? Yes, she did lose that naivete about how the world worked, and when we face disillusionment, that's naturally going to happen. But in its place, something else was born, an intense willpower to escape. But her endgame was quite different from her cohorts. She wanted everyone to get out alive. Not just herself or her closest friends, but Gilda, Phil, and even Don. Really, Em? Even Don? You're better than me, I'll give you that. And she never compromised on her goal. It didn't matter how many times Norman or Ray told her that what she wanted wasn't reasonable, she didn't back down. She imposed her will on her hyper-intellectual peers. And what was the end result? Not only did she and Ray make it out, but everyone who was able to join the escape not only broke out of there, but they made it to the other side. And how did she do that? Yeah, she had determination and a never die attitude, even after Isabella broke her leg. Oh, man, it still hurts to think about it. But that determination was stoked by the flame of focus. Emma knew what future she wanted for herself and her family, and though she wasn't a 12th level intellect like the boys, her focus became the heart of her crew and kept them going even when the others had no idea how to logically continue. And that's the beautiful thing about the dynamic of this terrific trio. Just like how they synergize their ideas and ideals to save their friends, we can combine their approaches when facing massive disappointment. The way our three protagonists traverse through surviving through the reality of their lives, we can gather something from each of them. This might surprise you, to think that we can actually take something from, say, Ray and use it in a productive way in our lives. But yeah, we can do it. For Ray, he did take a more negative route in regards to his reaction to seeing the truth, but he did come out of the experience with something important. He realized that people are gonna people. Even in the best case scenario, people are going to disappoint you, let you down, or just straight up betray you. And that's not even always intentional. It doesn't happen all the time, but unfortunately it happens. And when people do what people do, you need to be prepared to take care of yourself. Again, not in the I got mine, bump everyone else kind of way, but in a what's the best thing I can do for myself and those I care about without hurting anyone else sort of fashion. You can watch for yourself and not be a douche, and Ray eventually learned that. Don't be too surprised when people do you dirty, because people are gonna people. With Norman, it's truly important to have a plan, but remember every plan is gonna have its limits, because you can't come up with a 500-step plan that predicts the actions of others months in advance, because who can? But you can control the areas of your life that you have direct influence over. You may not control how other people treat you, but you can control who your friends are. You may not always have a choice as to where you can and can't go during this craziness, but you do control how you spend your time. Seeing where you do have control and pivoting to that is vital when experiencing disappointment. And lastly, Emma was able to recover from potentially crushed dreams and a crushed leg to live the life that she envisioned for her friends with her focus on the future. It can be tough to wake up in the morning realizing that your life is not what you thought it was, but it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Where do you want your life to go? What do you want to be doing? Focus on those things, plan out how you're gonna get there, and protect those goals. Put it together, and that's exactly how these three kids escaped the inescapable. What in your life do you feel is inescapable or has disappointed you? How will you break out of it? Your answer to that question will not only determine your next move, but all the moves that will come after. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what other characters and franchises you'd like me to discuss next. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video is ready. Until next time.